All right, gentlemen. So you remember with the MANA project,
Lady, shut up.
So with the MANA project, the difficulty we ran into was that when either an object moved to the magnet or she moved to a bigger object, we didn't get the exact distances right. And basically that occurred because we had two axes coming together rather than the front of one object meeting the front of another object. So there's a number of ways around that, but one of the ways we can do that is by using these built-in functions. So if you take a look over here on the left panel, you'll notice we've been working with properties. We've set vehicles and opacity in a couple of cases. We have methods that we've been using and creating new ones. And some of you may have played with these built-in functions. So if I take a look at some of the functions we have, one of them is camel distance 2. Okay, so in this case, the important thing is if you're going to use this, you need to have the camel positioned so it's facing the object that it's going to go to. So whether you do that by right-clicking and then clicking on methods and then turn to face, or you drag that into your code. Sometimes it's not a bad idea just to drag that into the code right at the beginning so that you know that if it gets bumped or turned around, it still is going to be facing in the right direction. So we can place that in there. Now we're going to go in, and the problem is that when you go to camel distance 2, if you try to drag that in here, nothing happens. It doesn't let you. The reason is because all functions return some value. It returns, in this case, it's returning the distance between those two objects as a number. Okay, so if it's returning something, it has to have somewhere to put it. I can't return a value and have it just sort of drop on the floor. So I need to put it somewhere. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. One of them is that I can, if I go into properties, and I would suggest you make these world level properties, you can create something called a variable. And a variable, as you should remember from math, is something that is a quantity that is unknown until you give it a value. So in this case, I'm going to set a variable, and I'm going to call it distance to City Hall. And this is a number. Okay, we're going to explore Booleans and objects later, but for now, we are dealing with a number. And I click on OK. And now what I can do if I go into functions, actually what I want to do is I'm going to go here, I'm going to drag this in, I'm going to set the value of that to, and I'm just going to put an arbitrary number there. It doesn't matter what it is. Now I'm going to go to my functions, back to camel, and I'm going to drag this distance 2, and now I'll see that I can drag that here because this is a number. So you can treat these functions just like any other number. So in this case, it's the distance from the camel to the City Hall. And now I can have the camel move forward. So he's going to move forward this, and if I go down to expressions, I see world distance to City Hall. So I'm going to have him move forward that much. Okay, so now I've got this function built in. The neat part about this is that no matter where I move the camel, it's still going to work, as opposed to if you had a solution where you set up and said, okay, well, the camel looks about 20 meters away. If you move the camel further away, your program would no longer work. So now if I hit play, camel moves into City Hall. Again, we still run into the same problem, though, is that that distance to function has measured the distance between the axis of the camel and the axis of the City Hall. So I'm going to stop that. And what that means is I need to subtract two distances. The most important one is I need to subtract the depth of City Hall. So the depth is the distance actually from the back to the front of City Hall. The axis typically is in the middle of an object, and so therefore I need to subtract half of the distance. So if I click on here, I'm changing the distance that I'm going. I click on this little arrow down here. I see this math thing. And when I hover over the math word, you'll see we can add, subtract, multiply, or divide. And so I'm going to subtract a distance. Click on subtract. Again, how much do I want to subtract? Well, for now, I'm just going to stick in an arbitrary amount. What I want to do is use another function, and that is I'm going to now look at City Hall, and I'm going to say City Hall's depth. Okay, so if I put that over the 0.25, I'm now subtracting the depth of City Hall from the distance between the two. If I click on play, should be a lot better. Camel goes a certain distance. If I move the camera around and see, I could see that the camel is a little too far away from the front of City Hall, because theoretically what I need to do is I need to divide this by half. In order to do that, again, I click here, I go to Math, I use Division, and this time I'm going to just stick with divided by 2. And I hate the way Macs do this. I don't want... There we go. Nope. Arg. Okay, let's try this again. Math divided by... Okay, so I'm going to have to do this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now I'm dividing the depth by 2, and that should be almost exactly where I want it to be. Theoretically, I should also have to subtract half of the depth of the camel, because what's happening is I've now got the camel's axis is moving to the front of the City Hall. But in this case, it seems that the front of the City Hall accounts for these pillars here, and so it's pretty much okay. It's going to work the way we want it to. All right, so does everybody understand how I've created this and how I've set it up?